What is a wealth tax? And what exactly can it accomplish for the United States?
You have stirred up quite a conversation, and we want to have it with you this morning. In particular, what I wanted to start here, I had a conversation with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen last week, and I asked her about the prospect of a wealth tax, and she said she thought it was, quote, very difficult with implementation problems. And I wanted to understand your thought about how this would work.
So I just want to start by saying if Janet Yellen is all on board except for implementation, we're in really good shape on this.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is hard.
Lately, a wealth tax, or at least some form of it, has been a hot-button political talking point, especially among young liberals. But quickly before we get into the video, we would love it if you would leave a like and subscribe. Not only does it help us understand what kind of content you guys love to watch, but it also helps us with the YouTube algorithm. Thanks. The basic idea of a wealth tax has fluctuated through the last few decades, from capital gains taxes or selling of assets for profit to real estate taxes built to progressively tax the acquisition of personal land ownership, or in English, raising the taxes more the more land you own. Further, wealth taxes have a few key differences from the more common tax types, such as sales and income taxes. See, most taxes are enacted when an individual interacts with the economy, either infusing money in assets or extracting them. This kind of tax is incredibly common in Western worlds and is placed upon each citizen in a relatively equal way. But what people like Senator Warren and others are suggesting is a much different kind of tax, one that you only have to pay if you grow rich enough. And in some European nations such as Norway, Spain, and Sweden, this asset tax actually already exists. But even in these progressive tax systems, there are quite high measures to pass to qualify for the wealth tax. In Norway, for example, the wealth tax is only enacted on stocks owned past 164,000 United States dollars, and is a tax on 0.85% of every dollar earned past that amount. And yes, these taxes are actually quite high, but those facing them can easily overcome the budget. But while nations such as Norway have these wealth taxes in place successfully, where American liberal policy differs is where the taxed money will go. In Norway, they simply use it alongside other taxes, simply redirecting the funds equitably between state and federal governments. This is in stark contrast to the plans such as Elizabeth Warren's that focus on using a wealth tax for direct cash investment in poor Americans' lives, a philosophy most often cited as wealth redistribution. And this is the basics of an American wealth tax. The technicalities are nearly endless, but the purpose of this video is not to explain modern monetary policies and economics, but rather to point out the many positives of a wealth tax and what it could do for a modern economy. So let's do that. But first, let's go over some basic tax philosophy and government spending policy. Now, this may be a controversial statement, but governments don't just burn the tax money you give them. In 2020, the American government spent an astonishing $6.55 trillion. But every single cent was debated and accounted for. Really, look at the budget agreements. They're available on government websites. They're absurdly large. And actually, I agree with a lot of people who say, well, just spend less money in the military, redirect our funds instead of creating essentially a new tax bracket to fill in the void. But as crazy as it sounds, if we're not going to commit to changing how we spend our money as an American government, then we're going to have to spend more. For example, the American Society of Civil Engineers estimated that from 2016 to 2025, The US would need to use $1.5 trillion United States dollars to reinvest in its aging infrastructure and to simply continue running the nation smoothly. In short, the US is running out of dough, fast, but weirdly, the US population is far from it. At least these people at the top. And the wealth tax on them could bring in nearly $2 trillion for the United States government in the coming decade. I should be specific, that calculation is on Elizabeth Warren's 2% wealth tax, so take it with a grain of salt. But one of the biggest hits on the wealth tax, introduced by Senator Warren or Senator Sanders, are not in the code or the literature of the bill, but on supposed effects that are brought up by some economists on the supposed effects that would arise if we were to tax the ultra-rich even more. Let's dispel some of those. As you can see, many millionaires and billionaires would apparently stop working if we were to implement this tax. However, as the bills introduced only affect people over $32 million on Sanders' bill and $50 million in Warren's, it is fair to say that if this extremely wealthy group of the population are still needlessly working, then it stands to reason that they would continue through another tax increase. But, as stated before, really more so than any specific policy introduced or money brought in, taxing the rich more just makes sense, considering the astonishing wealth inequality being shown today in the United States. In the last 40 years, the bottom half of all earners have seen a 7% drop in their share of the economy, as can be seen here. All the while, just the top 1%, that famous demographic from the Occupy Wall Street campaigns, have seen their share of the economy grow from 12% in 1980 to over 21% today in 2021. This growing inequality is bad for the overall economy as well. If resources are not being used efficiently, then the risk for an economic crash grows. But the graphs we've seen, as well as the general trends in the United States, have shown us that years of income inequality have created the economic inequality crisis we are facing now. A wealth tax could help eliminate both the rampant income inequality as well as some of the US budget issues, so it can clearly be seen as a solution here. It's just simply up to us to push for it to finally be implemented in Congress. And for the future of us all, we better get educated and find solutions.